So I just rewatched Batman v Superman for probably the first time in years that I can remember. And I gotta say, this film is a mixed bag for me. I wanted to kind of do a brief review for it in 2020. I know it's years old, but hey, it's my channel. We do what we want here. So I'm taking a look at Batman v Superman, what I liked, what I didn't like. I'm also not going to be using clips of this movie because every time I've used clips of a WB film or show or anything like that, even when it's legally fair use and review, it's been flagged by the copyright system. You have to wait like a month or get it taken down. I'm just tired of it. I'm not doing it. I'll show screen caps. So what I will say before we get started is if you expect me to either defend the hell out of this movie because you love it to death, or you expect me to tear it to absolute shreds, I'm not really going to do either. I have some things I really like about this, but there's also a lot I don't like. It's a real mixed bag of a film for me, and I would say that over the years, I've liked it less, honestly. But I still enjoy it. So, let's take a look. The first thing I do want to say about this movie is that the cinematography is unreal. If you can say nothing else positive about this movie as a moviegoer, I don't understand how you couldn't say, wow, this is a pretty movie. Now, sure, the color palette, pretty drab, pretty dull. I agree on that. It's a dark film in terms of just the colors and obviously the tone. But you gotta admit, like, these shots are beautiful. You have shots like Superman facing down with Batman at the Batmobile. You have things that are going on during fights in the movie. You have the whole Messiah complex type stuff with Superman that was very intentionally shot. I mean, the lighting and the way that this movie is shot is pretty. Regardless of color palette, regardless of the way it's written. It's a pretty film. And I think that that's something that is a testament in and of itself. It's something that is very, very prevalent in Zack Snyder's films, whether it be Sucker Punch or even the Watchmen adaptation. He is someone who understands cinematography, and he deserves the credit for that. I also think it has really interesting themes. There's interesting themes in here of hatred, of xenophobia, stuff like that. I actually watched this film with my mom, who had never seen it, and she pointed out to me something interesting I didn't really take the time to think about before, which is that they do establish everybody's point of view pretty well. And when I say everybody, I really mean Clark, Bruce, Lois Lane, you know, those points of view, the points of view that matters. I think that there's other points of view that could have been better established, like Lex Luthor in this movie. But Bruce and Clark especially, you see why they think what they think. So just to take a little look at that, at the beginning of the movie, you sort of flash back to Man of Steel. You see that Bruce was actually in Metropolis at the time it was destroyed by the fight with General Zod at the end of Man of Steel. He sees what's happening. It's really just like tons and tons of explosions, buildings falling down in front of him. He's pretty much powerless to do anything to stop this. And he sees at least one close friend of his, Jack, which, by the way, I think we could have done a better job establishing a relationship between Jack and Bruce so we care. Regardless, we see Jack die, partially because of, this fight. Well, completely because of it. And Bruce partially blames Superman for that because he was involved in it. Now, if you watch Man of Steel, one of the big criticisms of it is Superman not taking the fight elsewhere. And while I do understand that for that movie, and this is not a review of that movie, if you go back and rewatch it, there are a couple times where Superman kind of drags the fight up into the air or tries to drag it somewhere else where it's not, a huge threat. But at the same time, you have General Zod in that movie now trapped there trying to cause as much damage and destruction as he possibly can. He's not just trying to kill Superman, he's trying to just wreck everything. I mean, that's kind of what state he's in that point. So what I'm saying is, whether you like that or dislike it, I think that makes sense in the extent of that film. And once you try to get into BVS, they moved away from those ideas a little more, or they tried to with Superman. Superman's not really as much of a, just slamming into people guy in this one. It's a little more restrained in those regards, but it loses its restraint with Batman. This is also where the film has a big schism among fans, I've noticed. Now, believe it or not, even though I think Batman really shouldn't kill, I think that it's been proven that a core Batman shouldn't kill, I've always had a different perception on these film Batmen, in the sense that none of them have been comic accurate. Really none of them. I mean, Adam West, not comic accurate at all. I guess he's kind of comic accurate to the campy era, but even then he's just completely doing his own thing. Michael Keaton was offing people left and right with, really just grinning about it, and I thought it was fun. I never saw him as the core Batman. You have all these Batmen are weird in terms of straight from the panel adaptations, and they're not really to the point just Batman. They're sort of their own thing in the Batman costume. I'm okay with that, actually, believe it or not, because I never saw them as the main Batman. Now, if you're going to tell me that next month in the main continuity DC issue of Batman, Batman's going to off somebody, I'm going to be pretty annoyed because that's against the character. But the character has never been true to the character in the movies. It's not an excuse, but again, it's just something where I saw it and I was like, I don't think this is that different. That said, it's more brazen. I mean, you have him just straight up gunning people down, like, very bluntly. He doesn't care at all in this movie. And in the sense of it being in the movie, you have to look at it from two different ways. As a film, it does not matter because it doesn't affect the merits of the film. However, as an adaptation of a comic book character, just like with previous ones, except this being more brazen, more dark, and really embracing that aspect of it, it sort of flies in the face of what Batman is to most of us. He's not a killer. He is someone who has restraint and doesn't just straight up murder people. And I also think that Zack Snyder's attitude on this was really bad. This is not something that reflects on the movie, but I do think that it gives context to the movie when it was being created, because I did want to take a look at a couple of quotes that he had, which I found these on Collider. I definitely will put the link to the source below, but I do think it provides a little context to these ideas for him. He said, someone says to me, oh, Batman killed a guy. I'm like, F, really? I'm like, wake the F up. That's what I'm saying about once you've lost your virginity to this effing movie, and then you come and say to me something about like, oh, my superhero wouldn't do that. I'm like, are you serious? I'm like down the effing road on that. You know what I mean? Which I'm glad he expanded on this because I did not know what he meant at all by that. Okay. It's a cool point of view to be like, my heroes are still innocent. My heroes didn't lie to America. My heroes didn't embezzle money. My heroes didn't commit to any atrocities. I'm like, that's cool, but you're living in a effing dream world. The cool thing is, like, mythologically speaking, I'm 100% fine. And by the way, I love more than anything Superman and Batman. But in the same way that Alan Moore was fed up with effing like, okay, no, they do this. Clearly this is a response. Watchmen talks about comic books in the same way that this movie talks about comic book movies. But it talked about comic books at their most, they were broken. So he was just addressing that. The thing with the comic book movies is, and I'm a fan. I go and see them. I love them. He kind of tangentially moved off from the topic, but he was trying to say that this was meant to be a deconstruction of comic book movies. In some ways, sure, it works as that. I mean, Batman in this is broken. That could work if you gave some sort of establishment of it. I think the problem with this movie is that, while we do get a fully clear view of why Batman and Superman feel the way they feel about each other, we don't get a fully clear view of how Batman got to be where he's at today. We hear lines like, oh, you've been fighting crime for 20 years in Gotham. Oh, fighting crime and stopping criminals for 20 years. That means nothing now. We hear those, so like we do get the explanation that he's been at it for a long time, but we don't see any of it. We just see things like, well, clearly Robin died. We see the suit. We see that he's broken down physically and mentally. That's fine. And that works. But the problem is that you can't really expect people to go into the movie and swallow that adaptation if you're pitching this to comic book fans without giving them a reason to go in and love that adaptation. I think that's the issue with that aspect of Batman killing. There's really no establishment of it in terms of context. We're just dropped into the shoes of like viewing it and seeing, oh wow, he just straight up offed like 15 people. Okay, that's kind of weird. And there's arguments to be made that the Bale Batman even, who was more restrained, killed people off camera that we wouldn't have seen, like through the tumbler, crashing through stuff, etc. But it's not brazen in the sense of like just watching it happen straight up. I do think that is a hard pill for people to swallow. It's not an aspect I really liked in this movie. It is one I think I could have gotten behind and really liked if you established it with a bunch of context. We don't have it, so it's left with what it is. As an adaptation. As a movie itself, I don't think that has a bearing on the merit of the film objectively. You know, this film could still be great. Batman could be, you know, running around in a loincloth. The movie could be good and well written. But the problem is it's not really. I mean, it's fun and it's fine. I mean, there's obviously the interesting themes, the broken heroes, the deconstruction. The writing, like how Bruce says that men stumble and fall. Or I'm sorry, Bruce doesn't even say that. It's actually Clark's father who says that men stumble and fall and that they will follow you eventually in the light. Like Jor-El says that in Man of Steel, so does the script in this movie. It stumbles and it falls in a lot of different places and it gets back up again and it moves. It's like a really uneven film. I think the casting is great, with one exception. I do not like Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. I used to, actually. I don't know why I did. I used to be totally fine with him and actually enjoyed his performance. I like Eisenberg as an actor, but when I went back and rewatched this again, I really find him annoying. And I mean that in the sense of every time he's on the screen, I'm just like, move on. You know, you want to see a good Lex Luthor? Michael Rosenbaum. Fantastic Lex Luthor. This is not a character that you can't adapt to the screen, but this really didn't feel like Lex Luthor at all. Oh, but it's Lex Luthor Jr. Yeah, okay, fine. It's a different character then. It's Lex Luthor Jr., but you're still giving him the name Lex Luthor. You're putting him in that titular role against Superman, and Batman in this case, and that's just what people expect to see. Also, on its own merits as a film, like if we're just even ignoring the adaptation aspect again, he's really just not a well thought out character. You get glimpses of his past in the sense of like he seems to have an animosity and anger against religious concepts and God because he was treated poorly as a child, and he doesn't like the idea of someone being above him because he's so knowledgeable. That's about it. His motivations are not well explained. They just sort of are there, and you're left to swallow them or not. I guess that's fine. It works okay. That's not how you write good villains, but it functioned. I think you get to the point where Batman and Superman square off and the action shines through again. It's unreal in terms of the cinematography, the fight choreography. It's great. It's also really telling that the fight choreography in the warehouse is amazing. But it's kind of sad that we have to pick and choose. I never found the fight choreography to be very good in the Christopher Nolan films of Batman. It's okay. It works fine. The fight choreography in this is actually really impressive, but the writing is a lower caliber, I think, than something like that. I personally would always rather take a better story. This, to me, was not the Transformers idea of just going in to watch Superman and Batman punch each other a few times, because the movie tries to be thought-provoking. And if it didn't try to be that, I wouldn't care. But it really does. It tries to pose questions about what it is to be human, about what's the difference between a Kryptonian and a human. Is Superman a human? You know, where does he belong? Where does he fit in? Is Batman a human anymore? He's more of a monster at this point. It does try to pose these questions without answers, really, but it doesn't go anywhere with them. I also think that the final last 20 minutes of the film is completely unnecessary. Doomsday was not needed in this movie at all. I don't think he added anything to the film, and he's a byproduct of them very clearly pushing Snyder to build up the Justice League universe or movie at the time. Because Snyder was trying to shove in all these cameos and things like that to show off, oh, Aquaman exists here, Cyborg exists here, Flash exists here, so that when we bring them in Justice League, it's not out of nowhere. But the thing is, it is out of nowhere. The MCU worked, regardless of your opinion on it, because you were able to build up characters over time, then cross them over in team-ups, build them up over time again, cross them over in team-ups, build them up over time along with team-ups, then cross them over in team-ups and on their own, and you sort of hit that stride where you're able to keep doing that. They don't do that in this universe. They just introduce somebody, they're just full-blown there, all of a sudden in a team-up movie, and that's it. Again, this movie suffers from a lack of planning, clearly, and I don't think Zack Snyder is fully to blame for that. I think a lot of it really is the studio pushing him to get to Justice League as soon as possible. Because I love Man of Steel. It's really up there, probably in my top 10 or 15 superhero movies, actually. I think it's fantastic. I really still enjoy this movie, but it is such a mixed bag that I wish was better, and that I wish I could say I love to death. As it is, just like when I saw it years ago, I still like it. I still think it's fun, but I don't have nearly as much good to say about it anymore as I've gotten older. So I'm interested to see what you think in the comments down below about my take on this movie. Maybe you absolutely love it and you think I'm being really disingenuous and that I'm not representing it well. Maybe you hate it and you wish that there's other stuff that I had torn apart. Or maybe you're in the middle like me. You think it's a fun movie, but it could have been a lot better. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. Be sure to check out the new Let's Play channel, which will be linked in the description below. We've got the Patreon up, Twitter, Discord, Reddit, everything. And as always, have a fantastic day. Stay awesome.